Could it be the end for Boris Johnson?
I was absolutely furious, and it felt like an enormous betrayal.
I was getting a large quantity of emails from my constituents saying that this is outrageous.
Where's Boris Johnson now?
Where is he?
Yeah.
Working?
Oh, we're not having cheese and wine today.
We've all been through this horrendous time. I think we need to cut the Prime Minister a bit of slack.
As he waded through the empty bottles and platters of sandwiches, he didn't realise it was a party.
The partygate scandal has engulfed Boris Johnson's government.
Having to apologise to the Queen about those parties, was that a moment of shame for you?
I deeply and bitterly regret that happened.
For some, partygate is all about the Prime Minister's relationship to rules and honesty.
A man who is getting on with the job, a man of integrity, a man of decency.
This is like the schoolboys dog ate my homework. Series of excuses, and it's clear that the truth is not being told.
Can Boris Johnson bounce back?
Very low numbers. Other European countries.
Talking of Christmas, should we be cancelling festive parties?
This version of the virus is now starting to spread in the community.
Should we cancel Christmas parties?
As we worried that Christmas might again be cancelled due to COVID, the first report of a Downing Street party during lockdown a year earlier was published. Number 10 responded to that story in the Mirror by denying there'd been a party and by insisting COVID rules have been followed at all times. But in the avalanche of reports that followed, that response, often repeated, just crumbled in the face of the facts. The revelations came thick and fast. There was the event with cheese and wine.
In this photo taken during lockdown, the Prime Minister, his wife and staff are drinking wine in the garden.
There was the bring your own booze party in the Downing Street garden.
New questions about apparent breaches of lockdown in Downing Street.
Then there was the one where the PM was apparently ambushed by cake on his birthday.
The list of problems for Boris Johnson gets longer and longer.
There were at least 16 gatherings, 3 on one day. This was Partygate, and the public didn't like it.
I was getting a large quantity of emails from my constituents and letters saying that this is outrageous, saying that they are embarrassed, that they are angry.
And there was this.
Anybody have any questions today?
A leaked video of a mock press briefing with the Prime Minister's spokesperson, Allegra Stratton.
Is cheese and wine all right? His fictional party was a business meeting. And it was not socially distanced.
Wincing at the impossibility of spinning number 10 out of this one.
Hold on.
I was genuinely surprised when I saw that video that people were laughing and joking about parties.
Although, to be fair to Allegra Stratton, it was kind of an acknowledgement that there isn't an answer to this.
If individuals were having events in Downing Street which were social, purely social events during that time, then that shouldn't have happened.
I think, we've all been through this horrendous time. I think we need to cut the Prime Minister a bit of slack. This isn't an excuse for partygate or whatever you call it, but I think the staff in number 10 have worked all round the clock during this crisis, and they deserve a lot of credit.
Ruby Fuller and her mother obeyed the rules, even in the most heartbreaking circumstances.
So this is actually one of my favourite photos of Ruby. It was actually taken about 2 weeks before she died.
In May 2020, at the height of the first lockdown, Ruby had terminal cancer.
It meant that Ruby couldn't see any of her friends. She couldn't see her grandparents. She couldn't see her cousins. She saw them all for the last time on a Zoom call.
Ruby died on the 15th of May 2020.
I don't think there are words to describe how painful it is to lose a child. But the fact that we were in lockdown and we couldn't come together, that just made something that was already awful even worse. And we couldn't have a funeral or a meaningful funeral.
Ruby had died on the same day the Prime Minister and his staff were photographed with bottles of wine and a cheese board in the Downing Street garden.
I was furious. I was absolutely furious. And it felt like an enormous betrayal that the person setting the rules, the person telling us all to follow those rules, wasn't following them himself.
The Queen, mourning the death of her husband of 70 years, the Duke of Edinburgh, obeyed the rules to the letter. On the night before the funeral, however, there was another party, a leaving do in the basement of number 10. Booze said to have been wheeled in a suitcase.
I think the film and the photographs of the Queen in St George's Chapel are iconic, playing by the rules in circumstances that anyone would have said, if you break these, we fully understand in the circumstances. In the face of that devotion to duty, how do you consider the contrast of what is alleged to have gone on elsewhere?
Boozy parties held the night before Prince Philip's funeral, was having to apologise to the Queen about those parties the night before she put her husband of over 70 years, she laid him to rest. Was that a moment of shame for you?
I deeply and bitterly regret that happened.
Under huge pressure, Boris Johnson had ordered senior civil servant Sue Gray to investigate. At the heart of this scandal are two key questions. The first, did the Prime Minister break his own lockdown rules, the ones that he himself introduced? Adam Wagner is a barrister specialising in COVID-19 legislation. He's looked at both events attended by Boris Johnson in the Downing Street garden in May 2020. Whilst the rules appear to apply to number 10 staff, what about the Prime Minister?
Because at the time, the rule was you're not allowed out of your home without a reasonable excuse. But since that garden is his garden,
it doesn't apply.
I don't think there's any prospect of him committing an offence under the COVID regulations.
The PM's birthday celebration a month later inside number 10 could be a different matter.
Here, by this time, any indoor gathering which wasn't for a specifically accepted purpose was illegal. It makes no difference if you were organising the gathering. The question was, in law, was whether you were participating in the gathering. So if he walked in, saw a birthday party and said, I'm not having this, and walked out.
That's okay.
That's okay, because he didn't participate. But if he walked in and stayed for 10 minutes, maybe had something to eat, had a chat with people, that sounds like he's participating.
So he might well be liable there for a fine?
No, he might well be liable for a fine.
And then what sort of fine again, £60?
£100.
£100. Now, for the second key question. Did Boris Johnson knowingly mislead Parliament about what had been going on in Downing Street? If so, a breach of the ministerial code. So this is the introduction to the code. Let me read you a passage. The precious principles of public life enshrined in this document, integrity, objectivity, accountability, transparency, honesty, and leadership in the public interest must be honoured at all times. The author? Boris Johnson. So, did he follow these principles? Here's what he said about an alleged party on the 18th of December 2020.
What I can tell the right honourable gentleman is that
is that all guidance was followed completely during number 10.
Questioned again a week later, Boris Johnson's position had shifted.
I have been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged that there was no party and that no COVID rules were broken, and that is what...
In other words, if Parliament was misled, others would be to blame. A month after his assurances to Parliament, the PM had to admit he himself had attended the notorious Bring Your Own Booze event organised by his principal private secretary. He said he didn't know it was a party.
We've had a series of explanations, starting there were no parties. I thought should have gone to Specsavers, it was pretty obvious it was a party. Well, this is like the schoolboys dog ate my homework. Series of excuses, and it's clear that the truth is not being told.
If Boris Johnson has knowingly misled Parliament, he could be under pressure to resign.
To return, if I may, with the ministerial code, I guess a Prime Minister who really believed in a heartfelt way that these principles were precious. As soon as partygate emerged, he would have said, this is awful, I'm going to get to the bottom of it. And he didn't.
He established an independent inquiry. You're seeking to look into the soul of the Prime Minister. I'm not into the business of looking into the souls of my fellow men and women.
Just 2 years ago, Boris Johnson was riding high. In 2019, he won a whopping 80-seat majority, having promised to get Brexit done and level up Britain. The Conservatives won seats in the north of England they'd never held before, smashing Labour's red wall. Northwest Durham was taken by Richard Holden.
And I do hereby declare that Richard John Holden is duly elected.
My seat had a 25,000 Labour majority held by the Labour Chief Whip in 1997. And now it's got a Conservative MP for the first time in its history. Boris was definitely part of me winning that seat. There was absolutely no doubt about that.
He just reaches parts where other politicians can't. The Prime Minister's energy and charisma, one of the reasons why we've won so many seats in the Red Wall area. He has a great ability to connect with people. You walk down the street with him, he's got film star quality.
2 years on, that star quality has lost some of its lustre. The shenanigans at number 10 have left some of the 2019 intake uncertain about their boss.
During that time, people have had to make very difficult sacrifices, and I want those people to really to understand that people like me were on their side and doing the right thing throughout. And I want to know that at the centre of government that was happening as well.
Some MPs who've been around a lot longer, including Tim Lawton, have already called for him to resign.
There's a lot of angry colleagues of mine who really resent being put in the position that they're being put in, who've got serious worries about the credibility of what's coming out of Downing Street, who dread coming to the office every day for whatever the latest revelation is actually going to be, and want this thing brought to a head sooner rather than later.
The sound of Northern Lincolnshire and East Yorkshire. And all the music you love. BBC.
Many MPs still swear their loyalty to Boris Johnson. So this is an early test of public sentiment after Partygate. There's a by-election next month for this ward in Great Grimsby, being defended by the Conservative Party. Leah Nietzsche is the local MP and helping in the election campaign.
I've been here 40 years. Yes. 2 rocks. One, I had the good money from Mrs. Thatcher.
Oh, really?
And a furlough, I had a furlough, beautiful.
Oh, God.
But I think he's doing well,
yes,
the guy.
Yes.
He needs a second chance, and let's see,
yeah, exactly.
Is there any light in the end of a tunnel?
Are you in a forgiving mood this morning with the Prime Minister?
Yes.
Yes.
Ah, why is that?
Well, because I think everybody reacted the same when you were under pressure, and you know, and I mean they were working long hours.
Leah Nietzsche told me she'd raised Partygate with her boss, Boris Johnson.
I did talk directly with the Prime Minister and said, you've got to understand, you know, if you work in a food factory or you're a teacher, or you don't stand and have a glass of wine with work. This is not Watergate. This is a PM who's working incredibly hard. And I think people, realistically, in places like Grimsby know that.
He's just a man doing a job.
Right. No, but the serious point, you think it's a bit of a fuss about nothing, do you?
Of course I do.
Right.
It's a load of rubbish.
Well, where's Boris Johnson now?
Where is he?
Yeah.
Working.
Well, he's not having cheese and wine today.
No, he's not having cheese and wine. He wasn't having cheese and wine the other day because.
Oh, was it then?
No, it was saying it was groaning.
Oh, it was all a
these
mistake, was it? I respect the Queen. Does he? No, he does not.
Who?
Your leader, Boris Johnson.
Prime Minister's Questions is about to begin right now.
Nationwide, polls had been plummeting, sharpening minds in Westminster. Moves against the Prime Minister, plotted in secret, were now out in the open.
Can I start by warmly welcoming the honourable member for Bury South to his new place?
The Bury South MP, Christian Wakeford, had switched from Conservative to Labour.
Mr. Speaker, like so many people up and down the country, he has concluded that the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party have shown themselves incapable of offering the leadership and government this country deserves.
David Davis, the former Brexit secretary, then delivered what he thought was the coup de grace.
You have sat there too long for all the good you have done. In the name of God, go.
When the Conservative Party chose Boris Johnson as their leader, they had a pretty good idea of what they were getting. A politician with charisma, yes, but also with a certain reputation. As his schoolmaster once wrote, Boris believes he should be regarded as an exception, free from the network of obligation that binds everyone else. Rory Stewart was one of Boris Johnson's ministers in the Foreign Office. He's a staunch critic.
He has a very, very peculiar, to put it politely, relationship with the truth for many different reasons. Sometimes because it suits him, sometimes because he wants to make people happy. But basically, he says whatever he thinks he needs to say on a particular occasion to make it through the day.
In the run-up to Partygate, the Prime Minister was already fending off questions about his integrity.
Who initially paid for the redecoration of his Downing Street flat?
He should know that I paid for Downing Street refurbishment personally.
It turns out that wasn't the full story. This is the interior designer Lulu Little, seen here using her own home to promote her designs. Her company had been paid £112,000 to do up the Prime Minister's Downing Street flat.
Are you worried about the investigation, Prime Minister? Who coughed up for the flat, sir?
The renovation was initially paid for by a Conservative Party donor. It wasn't declared, leaving Boris Johnson open to claims of corruption. He said he knew nothing about it. By the time that was revealed not to be true, the Prime Minister had tried to fix the problem by paying for the refurb himself. What do you think his relationship to the truth is? How would you describe it?
I don't think he is regarded as someone who getting things right is an absolute priority. And he has a sort of confidence that he has the skills, basically, to kind of ride over it.
What do you think he's done to the office of Prime Minister?
Well, I think he's demeaning it. I mean, there's no other way of putting it. He will set a big picture and maintain an upbeat atmosphere, but looking at the details of policy, that is pretty low down on his priorities.
Then there was the Owen Patterson affair.
In a report, the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog said he had repeatedly broken lobbying rules while working as a paid consultant for two firms.
Boris Johnson wanted to save his friend and former minister Owen Patterson from being punished for breaking the paid lobbying rules. His plan? Create a new Conservative control committee to review the work of the standards watchdog.
I think the thing that the Patterson affair tells us most about is the government's attitude towards Parliament and the opening up the whole questions about how MPs are dealt with by Parliament, how the standards process works, but on the basis of trying to save one individual case, and that blew up in their face.
The ayes to the right, 250. The noes to the left, 232.
Boris Johnson forced his MPs to vote for the plan. It backfired. The opposition parties refused to sit on the new committee. The Prime Minister conceded defeat.
If you're being marched up the hill to defend, in this case, Owen Patterson, which isn't a sort of policy issue, this has nothing to do with the manifesto, it's not part of government, then it's doubly galling when, lo and behold, you're marched down again and the government does a complete U-turn, and we all look pretty silly at the end of it.
Owen Patterson resigned as an MP. The Conservatives lost the resulting by-election, a seat they'd held for almost 200 years. Allegations of sleaze seemed to be cutting through.
I think it's an accumulation of these issues over the course of the last year means that, you know, standards and ethics in government is something that we're discussing almost on a daily basis. That's an extraordinary situation for a government to have got themselves in. And most importantly for the government, this is distracting from the things that they want to do.
Well, I want to focus on the things that I believe that people at home are focusing on, and that's
and
the
you don't think
cost
they're
of living,
bothered about trust?
Getting the vaccine in people's arms, keeping the population safe, ensuring the NHS isn't overwhelmed, reopening the economy. He's developed a formidable relationship for getting big judgment calls right.
What's that got to do with public probity?
This is a Prime Minister who
I know that. What's it got to do with public probity?
This is a Prime Minister who then won the largest majority for the Conservative Party since Margaret Thatcher in 1987.
So it doesn't matter what his attitude to public probity is, as long as he wins. Is that the point?
The public are looking at the judgments the Prime Minister makes on the things that matter to their lives, and they're seeing a Prime Minister who gets those judgments right.
Boris Johnson is a proven winner, but the man who helped mastermind much of his success is now trying to bring him down. In the shadow of this crisis is an unelected advisor who was the Prime Minister's consigliere. Ever since his abrupt departure from Downing Street, he's been knifing Mr. Johnson in the front. Using his blog, he has systematically drip-fed explosive allegations about the Prime Minister, which has left journalists salivating for more.
What are we doing?
Taking back control!
Dominic Cummings worked with Boris Johnson on the Vote Leave campaign. And then, as his chief advisor, when Mr. Johnson got to number 10. In May 2020, he was accused of breaking lockdown rules when he famously went to Barnard Castle in Durham.
I can understand that some people will argue that I should have stayed at my home in London throughout. I respectfully disagree.
Boris Johnson backed Dominic Cummings to the hilt. He hasn't returned the favour. Since leaving Downing Street, Mr. Cummings has engaged in a bitter campaign against his old boss.
Is it part of your plan to hasten him out of Downing Street?
Certainly, I think the sooner he goes, the better, for sure.
Dominic Cummings, doesn't he come back to haunt the Prime Minister? I think Dominic Cummings is incredibly disappointing. The Prime Minister took a lot of criticism for standing by Dominic Cummings after the Barnard Castle affair, and I think he's been very disloyal to him.
For Dominic Cummings, loyalty doesn't come into it. He thinks the Prime Minister has become a liability and is calling for regime change on social media. Twitter account, the last sort of 2,000 or 3,000 tweets. You know, this goes beyond criticism. I mean, it's seriously vengeful, venomous stuff, some of it.
It is, and that's what he's like. Once he's in campaign mode, which for him this will be a campaign, he doesn't pull any punches, He uses hyperbolic language. He uses every trick he can think of, every leaking to the papers, whatever. He won't care about any sort of perceived rules or niceties. Like in every campaign he's ever run, he's going to be absolutely brutal.
After resisting calls to investigate the goings-on at number 10, the Metropolitan Police changed their mind. They say they only retrospectively investigate what appear to be the most serious and flagrant type of breach.
And what I can tell you this morning is that as a result, firstly, of the information provided by the Cabinet Office inquiry team, and secondly, my officer's own assessment, I can confirm that the Met is now investigating a number of events that took place at Downing Street and Whitehall in the last 2 years in relation to potential breaches of COVID-19 regulations.
When Cressida Dick made her announcement, she said one of the criteria that we use to decide whether to investigate retrospective coronavirus offences is whether there is any ambiguity around a reasonable excuse. So you've got to assume that the ones they're looking at are the ones where they don't think there's much ambiguity at all. And that's why I think they will be the pre-arranged social events.
Partygate will leave lasting questions about the leadership of Boris Johnson, his values, and the culture he created in number 10.
Now just imagine it. You are in number 10, and you set a disco going. And up there is Mrs. Thatcher, probably still awake, reading her papers. Are you going to take a chance? Are you going to run a disco at 1 in the morning? No, absolutely not.
The culture is set from the top, and civil servants working there will have a sense of what is and is not acceptable. Those are really important questions because, yes, ultimately it's his department and he is the one responsible for that.
The Prime Minister, I believe, is a man of his word. He's a man who has got a vision for this country.
Honest man?
He's got, my experience with the Prime Minister, I've known him a long time. He's always been straightforward and faithful to me in our dealings.
A man of integrity?
A man who is getting on with the job, a man of integrity, a man of decency.
This afternoon, Sue Gray published the first part of her investigation into Partygate. Of the 16 gatherings she examined, no fewer than 12 are now being investigated by the police, including one in the Prime Minister's flat. Sue Gray found there was excessive consumption of alcohol, a serious failure to observe high standards expected in Downing Street, and crucially for the Prime Minister, failures of leadership and judgment in number 10 and the Cabinet Office.
It isn't enough to say sorry. This is a moment when we must look at ourselves in the mirror and we must learn. Mr. Speaker, I get it and I will fix it. And I want to say...
Yet tonight, the key choice for the Conservative Party has not gone away. While the Prime Minister's convivial personality has been an electoral asset, has his behaviour in office become a liability?